We are going to bust some wedding myths. I'm Jasmine with Jasmine Kresovitz. I am a wedding planner and event designer in the Baltimore and DMV area. And I decided I'm going to define some terms for y'all, explain some things, and we're going to bust some myths of things that I've seen in the wedding industry. Today, I want to talk about wedding tax. I see this in all the wedding groups and all the bridal groups, and it is infuriating. Wedding tax is not a thing. If you're unfamiliar with the term wedding tax, it's a term that couples use when they feel that a vendor is charging them more simply because they mentioned the word wedding. You are correct. They are charging you more because you mentioned the word wedding, but it's looked at as this negative thing or that these vendors are trying to get over because the price just went up. So I'm going to break it down. I'm going to use some vendors as an example, but I want to tell you, and I'm going to say this multiple times, wedding tax is not a thing. The first piece that you need to know to understand why weddings are charged differently is that weddings are a different event from other types of events. It's not just a party. I like to joke, oh yeah, wedding receptions are just a party, whatever. No, it's not. When it comes to planning a wedding, consider the two segments. There's a ceremony and there's a reception. It is two events in one, in theory. The ceremony may not even be at the same location. And if it is, there may be a room flip. All these factors go into what vendors charge when we charge for weddings. So you can't compare this to a baby shower. You can't compare this to a corporate holiday event. You can't compare this to a bridal shower. Those events are usually 3 to 4 hours long, maybe 6 if it's just a reception. But weddings have a lot of moving pieces. And I will tell you, yes, there is an emotional factor to weddings. People have been dreaming their whole lives of this one day. So if we are charging extra, it may be for all those different layers, but there is an emotional factor. People have so much tied up into this day, and we only have one day to get it right. So these are just some of the little factors that go into play. Now that you understand that weddings are a different type of event for those of us who are in the industry, the next layer is understanding the business aspect behind it. We're charging based on our skills. We're charging based on our education level, based on years of experience. And most importantly, we're charging based on time. How much time is it going to take us to do the work that is needed for a wedding specific event? The craziest thing that I have seen is brides counseling other brides to not tell their makeup artists that it's for a wedding. Y'all can play with these makeup artists if you want to. I don't play around with my face like that. Y'all can play with these makeup artists if you want to, but there is a reason that there is a different price for bridal makeup versus birthday makeup, or, you're going to a social event or gathering. Do not do this, because the thing is, they're literally called a makeup artist, which means there's an art to it. In order to get your makeup has to look a certain way in person, and it also has to look a certain way on camera. And it has to look that way for a very long time throughout the day. Your makeup gets done at 11, 12 o'clock for a 4 p.m. ceremony. You've taken a bunch of pictures beforehand. You've gotten into your dress. At this point, your makeup's been on for 3 hours before you even made it to the aisle, right? Then you got to go do your portraits with your partner. Then you got to get through the reception, the dancing, all the fun stuff, sweating, all that. Your makeup has to last the entire day. They have, and I don't know all the methods, but I know there's the airbrushing methods. There's certain methods that they use because it's a skill, because it's the craft, in order to make your wedding makeup last. That is not needed if you're getting your makeup done to go out for your birthday. The next vendor example I'm going to use is a florist. So the florist doesn't really care in the general mock-up that this is a wedding, right? So the seasonality of the flowers matter. How much you need done matters, right? What that level of design is. Are these small centerpieces? Are these big centerpieces? That's not impacted by whether this is a wedding or not. What is impacted is the fact that your venue only lets us in 2 hours early. So now, if they had had 4 hours to set up, they wouldn't have needed as much staff, but they only have 2 now. Price just went up. I talked about this before. That venue thing is very important. So a lot of couples don't realize that until it's too late. That venue thing is important, and it affects things later on down the line. The other things that matter specific to weddings, your personal flowers. So there's extra things that are added on because it's a wedding. So all I'm trying to gather for you guys here is that this idea that vendors are charging you just because you mentioned the word wedding, or things just get expensive just because you mentioned the word wedding, it's for a reason. Like, there's literally a reason behind it. And that's the thing, ask the vendors to break it down for you. Like, I was able to just throw off a few quick vendor examples of this, but like, ask the vendors, like, okay, like, help me understand, like, how this all works. How is this specific to the wedding versus if I was having a baby shower? They can explain that to you very easily. And it's going to be basically what I just told you. There are so many layers and levels to planning a wedding. A photographer is definitely pricing you based on the fact that it's a wedding. You know why? Because, number one, they have to wrangle all your family and friends, your wedding party. You guys, people love to run off during cocktail hour when they know they're supposed to be in portraits. There is an additional layer of work that needs to be done for the style of photography that's done at a wedding. That's not the same as a corporate holiday party. They just running around catching people, hugging, doing cheers, doing shots, whatever the case may be. At a wedding, no, there's a specific segment, usually during cocktail hour, where you're doing your portraits, and people love to run away, right? Sometimes they have to hire a second shooter. I almost always recommend a second shooter depending on what your guest size is, because your photographer cannot be everywhere at once, right? So I had to explain this to a couple recently. Their ceremony and their venue were at two different locations. How is the photographer supposed to catch what's going on at cocktail hour when they're still with the couple and their family and friends taking portraits at the other location? So there are things that come into play, and we just have to make sure we consider all those wedding specific factors. Again, the wedding tax does not exist. I'm thinking about Mean Girls. The limit does not exist. I'll wrap this up with the fact that there is a vendor for every price point, every budget you may have. I'm in a lot of wedding groups and I see it all. I will say, do your due diligence. I mentioned those factors before on what people charge and why based on their experience level and skill set and the whole nine. If you're looking at a vendor who has 50,000 followers on social media and all these like features and, like Brides Magazine or Mona Luci, they are probably charging that more luxury level of pricing, right? And smoke and mirrors with social media. Just because someone has a lot of followers doesn't mean anything. Because I know people who have 500 followers on social media and they are booked and busy and pulling in six-figure incomes every year. But that's the thing. When you're doing your research and you're doing your due diligence, look into that. How long have they been doing this? What are their accolades? What are their education levels? Have they been certified in whatever it is that they do? Have other people vouch for them? Read their reviews. If they have 100 reviews, they probably know what they're doing. So I say do your research, but also your research doesn't include Googling. I'll use my market for an example. The price of a photographer in DC. So some of these major wedding publications like to give averages. Those averages are usually not correct. And wedding pros have such an issue, and I won't name them right now, but we usually have an issue with the fact that these wedding publications give these averages that are absolutely ridiculous. On average, you can get a quality photographer for $5,000 in the DMV. On average. And I'm saying that from experience. Some of these publications will tell you something like 2 to 3. And so I understand the frustration for couples when you're seeing this major publication saying, on average, this is the cost. So I would suggest you guys reach out to 5, 6, 7 vendors and just see what the consistent cost is. If they're all coming in at 5 is probably a good starting point, right? And seek out what it is that you're looking for. There are some vendors who specify, I do DIY weddings. There are some vendors who specify, I do luxury weddings. If you know that you have a DIY price point and you're looking at luxury vendors, you're going to frustrate yourself. That's like going into Jimmy Choo looking for Payless prices. Drop a line for me in the comments for a myth that you want me to bust.